And who at the retailer is typically the, who are you typically engaging with on that question in particular?
Sure. To be honest with you, it's everyone from C-level down to the person actually trying to solve the problem, to be honest with you. And everyone's trying to solve it their own way. They have multiple solutions coming in. Some retailers have enough resources where they think they can do it on their own. Some are relying on other folks or just manual intervention. So it's varying levels. But what we're looking at doing is we're in a unique position that we can, let's say, connect things. So our goal is to connect everything, create a digital twin. I know it's overused, but the reality is we're in a position where we can actually do it. Mm-hmm. And so giving that information, providing it in a cloud format, potentially even making it as simple as them querying us via, let's say, an API, say, where's my stuff? Tying in with existing enterprise cloud and doing it. And we do see, now what's interesting also, there are some things going on. You'll start to hear noise about ambient IoT.
Yeah.
And obviously ambient IoT is transitioning into what would traditionally be 4G, 5G, 6G space for us. So there's conversations happening on both sides. And I think that's going to be very meaningful. Ambient IoT, you're going to have things that can, the environment around them, they're low enough power, you're going to know where things are all the time. But then there's going to be the traditional, active connected devices, whether it's BLE or Wi-Fi or cellular, or to be honest with you, just one more connectivity mode is camera vision, right? Because knowing where something is in RF space doesn't necessarily mean it's physically there. So we're looking at tying the two together because we work in all of that space. It gives us a unique opportunity to not only connect, but validate that stuff and then make sure we can attest it in the cloud. So we're working across the board. We're also involved with, start looking at reusable packaging. How do we put sensors there? How do we know where the packages are? How do we deal with kind of the supply chain piece of that too? So ultimately, if we can provide visibility from source to consumption, that's our goal.
Well, but you start to get into, right, this idea around sustainability because, there are challenges sometimes. I think the retailers don't know, right? I mean, hey, someone says it's organic and someone says it's recycled materials, but you don't really know. And so not only knowing, but then being able to measure, right, X% of my inventory is this or Y% is that. And then if you can start to make decisions in real time, right, that are important to the customer and you can share it with them, right, they have complete confidence now because there's a transparency there.
Sure. Yeah. And I think the key part is it needs to be a trusted chain. And it needs to be, you need to trust, you need to have to trust the source. And I think that's where we can kind of be that, I don't want to say middleman, but at least make the connections, help validate things. And to be honest with you, this is the first NRF show that I've been at where ESG has come up so many times.
Well, because now it's like, you're reporting it, right, from an SEC requirement. So everyone has to be able to do it. They have to be able to measure it. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you have to report things, right? How that changes what people are actually doing.
And I'm sure this week at Davos, a lot of those conversations are happening also. So we're looking at what can we do? Because there's a combination of you're creating carbon by enabling technology. But is that technology creating this? Is there a shadow effect in a technology that reduces the overall impact of carbon? So it's going to be really interesting to see where it looks like maybe some goals aren't getting met, but those goals not getting met are broadly allowing everyone else to meet their goals. So we're looking at all of that stuff. Like I said, we're lucky enough to be a big enough company where we have to have our goals. We're enabling the technology going to allow other people to meet their goals. So it's fun. So I get a chance to talk about all of it. And there were a few dinner party conversations on ESG with some C-level folks. And we're going to continue those conversations after.
That's very well. It was interesting. Yesterday we had David, Yuri, and Harlan on a drone panel, right? And so we were talking about, David brought up this idea that drones can actually decarbonize, right? If you start to think about, right, you're not gonna have trucks idling, right? You don't have to have people go to the store for the one thing that they forgot. These are ideas and topics that people have not been able to connect.
And we're gonna have to quantify that. And all of us have our own math. It's getting together and making sure it's correct. One other thing is physical retail, right? Tearing down old physical retail and putting up distribution centers is very impactful, right? Because it's spent carbon and then new carbon, it's bad. So how do we repurpose? And we've all been talking about this. How do we repurpose? How do we get closer to the customer? How do we allow experiences? But also there's an ESG impact of leveraging what's already there.
Oh, I'm a big believer of like, right, we've got what we've got, right? Like, doing huge migrations and all this, like, let's try to fix what we have. Just, I think in terms, I mean, we want to push this idea of speed in the industry, right? Because there is, right, customers not waiting. And so I think that, one of the things you're talking about, this ambient IoT, one of the biggest challenges we find for retailers is they don't know the customer journey.
Sure.
And so it's actually, something we've been focusing on increasingly because they're like, where did they go before us? Where did they go after us? How long were they in the mall, right? Are they, kind of coming in the morning, going home and having lunch, coming back, right? So not only from like the REIT level, but also from the retailer level. Can you talk about how the ambient IoT might help with that or any other technology?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of things helping. And again, we're in a unique position because we're in the automotive space. So now you start talking, we know where people were before. We are in homes and technology. And then in physical space, we've been talking about this, I think, when we met before. Yeah. When we start digitizing the edge, when we start digitizing things in physical space, and if you can start connecting those dots and understanding that journey to make relevant recommendations or something that's meaningful or even make things more efficient, right? Getting back to the ESG goal, it's all going to be about creating that digital twin. And just like online, just when you move your mouse around, it knows exactly where you spent time on the screen, which pixels you're on. Our goal is to kind of be able to create a framework to support that. Now there's going to be the creepiness factor, there's going to be the utility factor, and we're going to have to balance that in the retail space, and how people embrace this technology and how far do we go with that, the knowledge we're able to get on that journey. So we will be able to know baskets with smart cards. What are people putting in real time, scanning them in real time? How do we target potentially or enable ads at the edge with CPGs in real time? So there's so many things. Once we know where everyone is in space, where things are in space, and ambient IoT, and then just connecting us in the physical space is going to be a big part of that.
Last thing to bring up is what's really interesting. You start to think about, you have the customer side, but you also have the employee side.
Sure.
Right. And so not only do we have incredibly high turnover in retail, but there's also, right, are we doing things as efficiently as we can? So if you know kind of who's in store, what they're doing, kind of, first of all, through vision or, do you have an out of stock? Sure. Let's get it filled. But like also doing that, right? I mean, you see, right, they'll bring out a few boxes, they'll kind of fill a few holes. There's still a ton of stuff, but you can completely change, first of all, their satisfaction, absolutely, right? I think their efficiency. And also, right, kind of, was there something that they did that enabled something else in a really great way? How can we repeat that? Absolutely. So I look at there's this whole extra kind of bonus in, starting to like really rethink not just the customer experience, but from an employee side as well.
We think about the associate experience all the time, because if they don't like their job, they're not going to show. It's hard enough to get labor to show up, people to show up to work as it is. But now if we can make them more efficient and maybe automate some things that are, maybe not the best part of their day, and now allow them to upsell. Maybe, instead of stocking shelves all day, you can become the wine expert in the store and make recommendations. Maybe you can just giving the associate an opportunity to grow also and leverage this stuff. And by the way, we had an interesting conversation with a CEO of a retailer saying when he visits the stores, he has employees come up and say, look, I just walked 16 miles today. Well, that was so great. And he's a CEO going, I don't want you walking 16 miles today. Like, that's not efficient. So, there's benefits to make them feel better about themselves, doing something meaningful, upskilling, and then maybe retaining people longer in a high turnover environment. And then at the same time, making the CEO happy that he's not just paying people to work out in the store all day.
I have to say, I almost feel like when I, first did a lot of work in the metaverse, this is like similar, because it's like anything that you've dreamed in retail, you can really do. And, from a retailer perspective, it's fairly frictionless, right? You can move very quickly. And this idea that you have a trusted partner like Qualcomm, I mean, and it's all done in one ecosystem, because I think some of the challenges are too, right? And you have a lot of partners that you work with, but this, there's a lot of kind of point to point. And I think there ends up being this like weariness. And when we see it, and we're seeing it even at the show, I mean, this to me is kind of, if I were to think next 3 to 5 years where retailers should be focused, this is really top of the list.
And that's our goal. I mean, when you think about it, we as Qualcomm will never sell anything to a retailer, right? We're not selling things to CPGs. What we're doing is understanding what retailers and CPGs, what they want, what their pain points are, and in using technology that we have this. We get to leverage our mobile technology and our automotive technology. So in our IoT business and our specific our retail IoT business, I have a lot of leverage. I have a lot of tools to work with. I can make recommendations about what's possible, not what I have. And so I'm not selling them a very specific thing. So it's fun. So they quickly fall into looking at Qualcomm as a trusted advisor,
Yeah.
saying what the art of the possible is, not what I have today to sell.
Art of the possible.
Yeah,
I like
I
that.
should get that shirt. I need to use that more. Yeah, so it's exciting that we're able to do that. I'm glad that they trust us enough to talk to us and ask what's possible. And then 14,000 IoT customers, we should be able to find someone to
Something
address
somewhere.
that one thing that they want to do.
No, it's really interesting. All right, thank you. I feel like there's still so many kind of
Sure.
boxes we haven't opened, but our time has come to a close, and enjoy the rest of your interaction.
Awesome. Thanks for
Thanks.
having me.
Take care.